Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 54th edition of the Frankenstein Chat. And yes, we have a guest this week, another guest. So we'll introduce our guest in a little while. But my friend and colleague of 20 or 25 years, Stan, you're with us again this morning. So how are you?
Yeah, good. Had a bit of a break in North Wales and come back because of the weather as much as anything else. But yes, feeling recharged and ready to go.
Yeah, good. Our guest is Maccs Pescatore. Hello, Maccs.
Good morning, Frank. Good morning, Stan.
Yeah, just to give everybody a little idea before Maccs introduces herself, I've only spoken to Maccs once, I think, prior to this conversation. And Maccs knows a guest who came on, Ian Milligan, probably about 6 months ago. He came in, for those who watch these, on the sort of Hurricane Foundation, which he is involved in Colombia, I think it is. And we had a guest from Colombia, from Bogota.
Wow.
So and that was proved
nice.
to be a very successful Frankenstein chat. It's been watched many times.
Yeah.
But obviously Maccs knows Ian, and Ian suggested that Maccs would be a really good guest. So I'm not building you up to the point where you...
No pressure.
No pressure. Thanks, Ian.
Maccs, just tell everybody who's watching who you are and what you do.
Sure, thanks. So I am CEO of Montessori Centre International, which is an organisation that's been going for over 65 years now, with roots back to Dr. Maria Montessori herself, who trained two ladies that set up the organisation. And we are one of the world's three largest providers of and facilitators of the provision of training of teachers that want to step into Montessori education. And then more broadly than that, we've grown into an organisation that's become the holder of the quality assurance standard around early years in particular, but education generally. And we work with governments and educational institutions, as well as nursery practitioners in that field. And then through our social impact program, through our charity, we get involved in all sorts of really interesting things in all sorts of places around the world, and in a way we can make a difference. So that's been hugely exciting for me.
So have you got a teacher background, or are you a business background?
I'm business background. So I've been with the company or the organisation for 3 years now, almost, but I stepped out of corporate life. So I'll admit to this only once today. I'm a chartered accountant by training. Many moons ago, stepped out of the profession into industry. And I really spent sort of 25 years in international corporates, mostly particularly in the last sort of 10 or 12 years, mostly in growth organizations go through some sort of change through acquisition or growth. Really, I've focused on become a generalist. You know, my interest is in how things operate, how things run, how to make things better. And so that sort of allowed me to step into that space. But I guess running alongside all of that, I have a passion and interest in the outdoors, and through various sports and outdoor activities have stepped into education through being educated. You know, so organisations like Platty Brennan, I have to take my hat off to, and Sluters have trained me how to be safe in the mountains and things. And so through this very sort of circuitous route of doing stuff on my own, coaching and mentoring people, I stepped into the space of education, and it came quite by chance, and it was a delightful experience when it happened, and I'm very pleased and privileged actually to be here.
Yeah, it seems like a similar sort of journey I went on. Although I was in education, I ended up in working for the co-op, and didn't realise actually how, I think I was intrinsically cooperative, but didn't realise it until I actually joined the organisation. It's very similar. Well, that's fascinating. We'll get. I think you and Stan are going to chat a little bit more about your personal views on sort of outdoor education, but also sort of experiential sort of experiences. You know, those sorts of things for children. So, Stan, what's caught your eye this week?
What caught my eye this week was 360,000 abacuses or abaci. I don't know what the plural for abacus is. I would normally say, get me an abacus and get me another, rather than go for a plural. But the government, a minister, is ordering or going to tender for 360,000 abacuses.
Yes.
For 6,000 schools. I mean, what are we on next? Scalpels for surgeons. A minister decides which is the right scalpel to use. I just find it incredible that that's something that the ministry is doing. Instead of saying to every school, here's 30 quid towards some maths equipment, which is effectively what it is, and whatever fits with the way you teach maths in your school, we are, in a sense, dictating a way of teaching maths, which I'm not against using an abacus, don't get me wrong. I'm not against that if that's what the schools do. But to imply that there's a way of doing things better than you're doing it, or different, and then say, and we're going to send you the equipment, so the suggestion is you therefore should do this, I think is wrong.
Yeah, Montessori education and all the approach that Montessori takes on all of this is aligned with you, Stan. It's not really about the tools you use, but it's the creating the right environment for the child or the children to find their way through, to nurture them, give them the activities. And it could be, counting can take place using leaves in the garden. It can take place using beads in a classroom. It can take all sorts of forms, can't it? And yeah, it feels quite rigid, doesn't it?
Well, seriously, haven't we? So had the mobile phones and stuff like that. It's just this intrusive attitude that the government has towards operational working.
The colour of the beads. No. Specified the colour of the beads that have to be on.
Are they blue? Are they going to have to be blue?
Red and white, Frank. What would you want? I just find it incredible, and the cost of doing it like that must far outweigh the cost of just giving every school a lump of money and saying this is for maths equipment.
Yeah, they will never learn. I mean, I think I've said this many times, but I think I said it last week. But Lord Jim O'Neill, the vice chair of the Northern Powers Partnership, for whom I do some work for, it's very clear that the DfE is the most intrusive of departments, and in a way, it undermines the professionalism of the profession. In a way, that there is a minister or a minister's advisor feeling as though they should dictate to probably, I suspect, the 6,000 schools serving probably the most challenging communities in the country. They're going to get these stack of abacus. It's that. Anyway, mine is Sean Harford, the senior HMI in Ofsted, is standing down from his role as the big education guru in the organisation, and that was a similar job that I had. And I know what it's like leaving. I've found that quite tricky, to be honest. But there was some information out this week, a report out, saying that the 71% of parents felt that Ofsted reports were reliable. That compares to 77% about 5-6 years ago. So there is a decline in reliability. The thing for me is that really parents have a sort of fairly, in most schools, when you've had a report, you're swayed by the evidence in the report. You don't collate that evidence yourself as a parent. You take it as gospel, really, that the inspectors have accurately and reliably collected the evidence, evaluated it, and made a judgment on it. I think my experience is that is not a very reliable process. And so in a way, it's remarkable that actually, having read the report, that parents only, getting on for 2/3 of parents think that they're reliable. I mean, I think this for me is the serious weakness in the system, in that I think there's erosion of trust in Ofsted. And I think parents will probably be the last to feel it, but the profession knows it. And I have experienced it on both sides. So for me, I can just see this declining even more over the next couple of years. Anyway, Max, what's caught your eye this week?
Well, I have a lovely little. Well, there's a lovely little picture in the Times this week of Coco, the Cocker Spaniel, and he is brown, hence the name, I guess. He works for the Grant's distillery, right, whiskey distillery, and his owner, and I'm not making this up, his owner is called Mr. Woof. WOOFE, right? So Coco's job in the distillery is to sniff the barrels in which the whiskey sits, and to tell the owner if they're up to scratch or not. So I just thought that was a wonderful job. I mean, if my 2 spaniels, if I could get them to sniff my whiskey bottles in the cabinet, that would be fantastic. So it's a lovely story, but it got me really thinking about, dogs in particular, and the other story that came out yesterday around COVID and the research done. I think it's in France, isn't it, where dogs have proven to be 97% effective at spotting a positive COVID situation and 91% able to spot negative people with negative tests. So it's the power of the olfactory of the canine, I think, is completely underestimated and should be in the government's armoury. It's just a wonderful story, I think, with some real life potential.
You walk through an airport and there could be drugs. No, I got through the drugs dog. I passed the money dog. Oh, COVID dog's got me again.
I've got too much duty free.
Okay. Well, Stan and Max, you had a bit of a chat before we started recording about your sort of love of the outdoors, really, and the benefits of outdoor education, which it sort of, I suppose, is central, isn't it, to some work, the work of the Montessori movement as well. So Stan, your background is, I mean, you used to run some of the outdoor pursuit centres, didn't you?
For a minute there, Frank, I was going to say you used to run. Well, let's just put that.
Used to manage.
They were in the 4 centres in Lancashire were under my stewardship for a while, for several years, but it's not something that was new to me. I as a teacher and then as a head teacher, I used to take children to outdoor ed centres and see it as a really important part of their learning, because one, it brought out the best of the children who didn't necessarily shine in the classroom. And secondly, it brought out leadership and team stuff that, again, you don't necessarily see. And I think it helped the relationship between teachers and children for a long time. So eventually what I did when I was a head was we looked for that activity to happen in September with the year 6s, and that formed a bond with that teacher for the rest of the year. And I've taken staff for staff days on an outdoor ed, and then when I was managing the centres, I think it was unusual to have somebody with an education background being the manager. I remember, and this is a story that'll stick, I went to the retirement of one of the centres, probably the week when I took over. I went up to, and the last words he said to the incoming manager was, "And don't let any of those mandarins from County Hall tell you what to do. If they do, ask them if they ever brought a group of children down a mountain in a blizzard." So I thought that's pretty sharp at me, that one, because he clearly didn't know my background. So I just had a quiet word and I said, my first question would be, what are a group of children doing on a mountain in the blizzard?
But you're right, though. I totally agree with you, Stan. Is the impact that being in the outdoors, whether it's walking in the blizzard or walking along a river or just being out there, the impact that can have on a young person or an adult, but a young person and the way that they see the world and see themselves in it, I think can be transformational. And the confidence they get from doing what was maybe an impossible thing, crossing a stream, or I don't know, climbing a frame, or it could be something that doesn't seem in of itself to be particularly significant, but if it pushes that person's sort of come out of their comfort zones and gets them to think creatively and do some problem solving and therefore gain some trust in themselves, isn't that a wonderful thing? And it can happen so naturally, I think.
Yeah, there's been a big rise in the number of schools taking forward this sort of forest school approach, hasn't there? I mean, in a way, that's and I think there is a sense that sits in early years, as opposed to it being a resource that can be used by everybody. And And I know that there are schools that do enable every single child to have access to that. I know that. But actually, you know, its origins and probably where it's most well rooted at the moment is in the early years. So I think that it's interesting for me, though, that how Montessori, you know, actually sort of developed from those sort of simple beginnings, you know, very, you know, no abacus, you know, it's probably the point, isn't it? You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
And actually, what is it?
Or an abacus if it's useful for that child's learning.
Yeah.
If that's how that child learns or learns best, then that's fine. But it might not work for the child who's sitting next to them or the one next to them.
Yeah, and that's absolutely key. It's child-centered, but and the outdoors. I mean, it's a big term, isn't it? But outdoors could be stepping out your front door. You know, it's that type. And you know, we have a lot of parents that are coming to us now, particularly with the pandemic and lockdown. And
have you found that? Have you found?
Yeah, well, I think has been pressure on parents to home educate. Again, another loaded term. You know, parents aren't teachers; they're parents, but they feel this pressure, and so you know we've been able to put out some resources for parents to sort of support and guide them, and just give them the confidence around doing some of this stuff at home. And it could be as simple as, you know, stepping outside and counting the rose petals on a bush. You know, that's mathematics. Or looking at color, the different colors of different plants and trees and flora and fauna and different textures. You know, there you go, you're educating your child, but it doesn't feel like you're educating your child. So I think sort of breaking down some of these loaded terms and just looking at the world as it is and feeling a connection with it, whatever that might be, is, you know, it's a really key thing.
I think one of the best sorry, you're going to let me just finish this, Stanko. I think you were going to come in there, but some of the best early years practice I've seen is in Leeds, and it's based on the Reggio Emilia approach, which has, I think, some alignment with Montessori. But actually, I think that the idea that you know, children are motivated when they come into school. They don't come in, you know, they may learn how to be passive, but genuinely the majority of children want to come in and actually do stuff that's interesting.
Yes.
And the idea that you can take some of their interests and their ideas and formulate a curriculum around that, you know, is really, you know, I think where probably Stan and I, that's where curriculum development occurred for us as teachers in teacher training. In, you know, I trained in the 70s, but that's where that's what all began. But there's still a place for that, and this idea that, you know, learning in the moment because something good happened or something interesting happened. I think there is a place for that, and there needs to be more of a place for that.
I absolutely agree, Frank. And you're right. Reggio, Forest Schools, Montessori, they've all got common roots around these concepts. And, you know, it's about trusting the child to guide you as to what motivates them. You know, and if you can get if a child can work out what they want to engage with at that point in time, and they do that the way they wish to, then they're really engaged in that and they're having a great time. And we all know that when you get, you know, from your own experiences, but if you can get yourself that immersed in something, you're going to develop quite quickly compared to if someone says, you know, there's a jigsaw, go and do the jigsaw now, you know, but I don't want to do the jigsaw. No, do the jigsaw now, it's good for you. So, you know, it's all about trusting the child to show you what they want to get involved with, how long they want to do that for. And then when they get to the point where they say, well, I've had enough now, and my brain's had, they'll, you know, allow them to stop. You know, even if they haven't finished the task or the activity, it doesn't matter, because it's that trying and, you know, making decisions for themselves that ignites that development. Yeah, absolutely.
And I was at a nursery school that was being inspected. A beautiful day, first beautiful day I think it was in a spring, and the inspectors criticised because the children were all outside and there was an opportunity to take a group in and do some one-to-one work with them. And the head said, and tell me, what would that say to the child about work?
Yes.
Now, all my friends are out running around in the grass for the first time in the year.
Yeah.
How does work fit in with that? I mean, I will say I don't know much about Montessori. I don't know much. I think you're always in danger when you talk at the moment about child-centered education, that you fall into this, you know, you're either at one end of the scale or the other. And my view is we're in shades of grey. But I think the curriculum work that's been done recently has missed out on this, that they've not said how children learn.
Yeah.
They've said what they must learn, but not the way in which you decide it's teach. So the experience children get through your school, which I think is a key part of the curriculum. And it covers the culture of the school, the relationships. You know, I firmly believe that a residential experience was really important for children. And when I worked in a very middle class area, the parents would say, well, we go to Italy, we go to Spain, we do. And I used to say, do your children go with other children without an adult there?
Yeah. Do they make decisions when they're there?
It's very, very different. You know, and again, you see children blossom in that. And I always think your own experiences, you know, I'm in my 60s now. I can remember being 9 and 10 in Cubs and Scouts and camping holidays and things that was just so different from everything else that you did.
Yeah, no, exactly, and exposes you to circumstances, and you just have to find your way through that experience, don't you? And it's that sort of trial and error and falling over and try to, you know, ignite the fire, or whatever it might be. All of that stuff. It's just exciting.
I mean, the challenge for schools now, though, is the cost. One of my centre managers used to regularly say, you can't put a price on a child seeing the sun come up over a mountain in the Lake District. And I'd say, unfortunately, you can. Just getting there, you know. And well, no, you can't talk like that. I said, I can. You know, I would love a Rolls Royce, but I can't have one because I can't afford one. And we have to find a way of getting children to these places at a cost that's affordable. And even transport costs now, probably. I would imagine now it's as expensive to get children to and from a venue than it is for them to stay at the venue.
I think that's right, Sam. I think for me, you've hit the nail on the head in some ways, because there's something that's happened in education generally where those extra, well, they used to be called extracurricular activities, didn't they?
Yeah.
They're somehow different to what happens in the classroom. But for me, it's all part of the same ecosystem. And so, you know, government needs to, in my view, sort of step up to the plate in that regard and recognise it as its responsibility to have a sort of less fragmented, more joined up offer for all children, you know, at all ages, from nursery all the way through. Take some of that pressure off families and parents to find those opportunities.
I think it was interesting. I was in a school in a city, Leeds, and it was in Manchester actually, and I was talking to some parents who were Romanian, and they were farmers when they were in Romania, but they were living in a high-rise block of flats close to the school. The school had allotments which it had started to offer to parents to maintain. And it really got me thinking about, you know, how we need to reach out to communities to actually capitalize on the skills that they've got, because that school also decided to take children to a farm and on a residential. And it was at lambing season, so children were lambing, you know, and being taught how to do that. And there was an assumption that the children wouldn't know how to do it because they were from inner city Manchester. But actually, you know, some of those Romanian kids, they could teach the farmers how to do it, you know. And actually, I think that there is something here around that. It goes back to something I think Stan said about that skill, about how, you know, what do we view as important for our country and important for individuals. You know, I think that there's so much emphasis on certain elements of the curriculum that actually undermine or don't prioritize other elements which are really, really important. You know, the ability to farm, you know, will be something we will all need in the future, and probably this country will need even more of, you know. So we need to have a sort of much wider consideration about what the requirements of the country are for the future, and that's not all about tech. That is about empathy, and it is about being able to work together collaboratively. And I don't always see that in some, I have to say, primarily in secondary school classrooms, I do not see the same level of cooperation and opportunity to share and to talk in class, in a meaningful way as I do in some of the primary settings.
Yeah, when you talk to people in business and you say, what are you looking for in young people? They say the ability to work as a team, the ability to show leadership, the ability
problem solving, critical analysis,
present an idea.
Yeah.
That's true.
I think the other thing, which is something we did try to do while I was there, is to make the centres more accessible to families. The one we, because effectively, if it's run for schools during the summer, during August, it's vacant. Same at Easter.
Yeah.
So when we built this brand new state-of-the-art outdoor centre at on the lakes on Windermere, we took a group of parents in who had autistic children and asked them to design what was best for them, and things that you just didn't even consider, not having had that experience. Parents say straight away, well, my child will run straight through those gates. And you're thinking, well, no, because we'll tell the children not to go. Well, you can't tell my child not to go. That's and it was that, plus things like having separate. We had dormitories that we could convert into a living room, dining room, and bedroom by the use of the doors, and that they were away from the others. So if the children did scream a lot, which some autistic children do, they weren't disturbing other, which is what the parents wanted. I hate being somewhere where everyone looks at me because my child screamed all night. And we were able to, to construct the building. So we had those alternatives. It was really interesting.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure whether the take up for parents in the summer holidays has been sufficient, because you've got to advertise it, you've got to staff it, you've got to do all those other things.
Yeah.
Which, for all their strengths, perhaps people who go into outdoor education don't have that business sense, because they live in a world where, well, it's a world I'd love to live in.
Yeah.
Where you get up in the morning, you're on the slopes of a mountain or watching a lake, or
in terms of, because actually we've had nearly half an hour, and as it goes so quickly. In terms of Montessori, is there a big growth in that area? Because do you think because of COVID and lots of home working, parents think, well, actually, this is a much more engaging type of approach to learning? I think, are they reaching out to you more now for that sort of support?
There's certainly an interest in children's well-being, children's general well-being, which incorporates things like parents, through research we've done and other people are doing, parents are saying things like their child is missing out on social interaction with other kids, their language skills are less developed than they might have been, and so that parents are focusing on their experiences and saying, well, what do we need to do to get that fixed? And certainly there's more talk about parents wanting their children to learn how to be resilient and confident, how to problem solve and work together, the things that Stan was mentioning earlier. So you're certainly getting more conversation around that. Now Montessori, a bit with like Reggio and a couple of the others, it's an approach, it's not a curriculum, as and it's about nurturing those things early on. And there are lots of nursery practitioners and nursery settings all over the UK that operate very similarly. They just don't call it Montessori, it doesn't have that label, but they're doing that. The approach is very similar. But I think it's wonderful that parents are starting to articulate for themselves what they think they want and are telling us that's what they want, because that can only help the teacher community to coalesce around what their approach ought to be and raise awareness in themselves as to how they then go about doing that practice and provide that provision. So that's a very long way of saying yes, but not just directly, it's also indirectly. So we're having parents come to us, and actually practitioners come to us, and governments outside of the UK come to us. But it all comes from this sort of source of real experience, which is great.
Just talking about government, do you have any contact with the government about your approach? Is there any sort of direct links between ministers and Montessori?
We've gone through a number of months now where we are talking to a number of MPs about Montessori education and early years in particular. We're part of the all-party parliamentary group for early years and childcare, which is quite active at the moment, just around raising awareness around that. And obviously recently we've also had the Andrew Lentham review, which was interesting. So there's a general awareness around early years in the UK and what ought to be done, and we have a voice in that in a number of fora. It's a really good opportunity for the sector as a whole, actually, to put education right bang in the centre of people's thought processes, and to do that in a way that's coordinated. From my perspective, it's really the first time in as far as I can see that practitioners always talk to governments and always talk to policymakers, but they're talking in a way that's organised. Parents now have a voice. Never before have we heard parents come together as a unified voice. So, and that's really elevated, I think, the conversation more generally in the UK around this. And I think it's fascinating and it's fantastic. So I hope good things come out of it.
There are Montessori schools around that, in effect, they are they're quality assured by you, but actually could Stan and I open a Montessori school and then seek qualification, assurance from your organization?
It's a great question. So there's nobody owns the Montessori name. It's out there. So you could open up a school tomorrow, put Montessori on the door, and go off and do something completely different and not deliver education at all, almost. But we do have an accreditation scheme that's becoming more and more popular within the Montessori communities, but also starting to be popular outside of the Montessori community. So our ethos is, we are Montessori, but really we articulate one version of what quality education looks like, and it's stuff that we can all recognize as being good, and we've articulated it in a framework. And so practitioners can then step up to that and say, okay, I want to make a public statement about a way we practice, and it's about ongoing reflection and being having that self-awareness to be child-centered and always relevant. So it's an ongoing journey, but this accreditation process allows practitioners to handle that process for themselves, make that public statement. They get a logo on the door, which means parents know what the logo means. They can make good judgments about that school, what goes on in that school. So yes, we do have a quality assurance framework, which is getting a lot of traction now.
So if anybody watching is interested in finding out more, obviously just Google or search online for Montessori and your name or whatever.
My name, Maccs Pescatore, or montessoritraining.org.uk will get you to our website. And there's my name at montessori.org.uk will get you an email to me. Always very happy to speak to people and just chat and just see where people want to go with it.
Brilliant. Well, I think that's probably getting off the 35 minutes. So it's just amazing how quickly they go, isn't it? And
it's just flown by. I think it's been great.
And actually, Maccs, I mean, we never ask people, but I mean, how did that feel for you?
I mean, I absolutely love the chat. You guys are so chilled, and I love the flow of the conversation. It's been a delightful way to start Friday. It really, really has. And you've also given me some things to go away and think about. So I've got some stuff to do over the weekend as well.
That's great. You've been a great guest as well, Maccs. And just to say, next week we have Emma Knight. I'm not sure if she's the CEO, but she's in charge of the National Governors Association. So Emma's going to be joining us next Friday. So a rich and varied list of guests we've had over the last couple of weeks, and looking forward. They look just as interesting. So thank you so much, Maccs. Thank you, Stan. And we'll see everybody. Don't forget, if you need to know more about Montessori, you know how to get Maccs's details. And I'll make sure that they're put up on the screen after the video ends, so that there's a direct link in there for you as well. So hopefully, all being well, we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.
Bye for now. Bye.